The food was poisoned on purpose, not by mistake, not because someone forgot a rule, because a manager decided a homeless man needed to be taught a lesson. If everything went according to plan, the man at table 12 would be vomiting blood before the check arrived, and no one in the room would care, because people like him weren't supposed to sit there. By the time the steak hit the grill, the decision had already been made. The dining room glittered with money and laughter, completely unaware that a crime was unfolding behind stainless steel doors. Crystal glasses clinked while death sizzled quietly in butter and salt. And the waiter who would carry that plate had no idea yet that serving dinner was about to become a choice between survival and conscience. 3 blocks away, in a motel that charged by the hour, Jonathan Miles stood barefoot on thin carpet and erased himself. He removed the watch that could buy the building, the ring that reminded him who he used to be, the suit that made people listen when he spoke. What he put on instead smelled like rain, dust, and streets that never forgive. The only thing he kept was a recording phone sealed inside the heel of his shoe. "Don't do this," his legal director whispered. "If something goes wrong—" Jonathan looked at the scar running across his right hand. Something already did, 30 years ago, and no one stopped it. At 7:46 p.m., Iron and Oak Steakhouse was packed. Politicians, executives, people who paid hundreds to feel powerful. Evan Brooks moved between them like a ghost, a waiter, a caregiver, a man one paycheck away from losing everything. He had learned how to read danger before it spoke, so when the front door opened and the homeless man walked in, Evan knew instantly. Not because of the smell, not because of the clothes, because the room turned cold. The hostess froze, security shifted, conversations dipped, then continued in lower voices. The man's jacket was torn, his beard uneven, but his eyes were calm, focused, measuring. Those were not the eyes of someone who had lost. Those were the eyes of someone who was testing the world. The manager arrived smiling. "Sir," he said sweetly, "I think you're confused." The man reached into his coat and placed a stack of cash on the counter. "Table 12, he said evenly. "Ribeye, medium." Silence spread like a bruise. The manager smiled wider and turned toward Evan. "You're serving him." Evan swallowed. He didn't know yet that the steak meant for that table was never meant to be eaten. Before we go further, let me know where you're watching from, your city and state. Comment below. Hit subscribe to see what happens next. The steak for table 12 was never meant to be safe. That decision was made quietly, in the kitchen, where the cameras didn't quite reach and the rules bent for the right people. Evan Brooks was refilling bread baskets when he heard his name. Evan. The voice came from behind the swinging doors. Mark Ellison didn't raise his voice. He never did when he was about to do something wrong. Calm meant control. Evan stepped into the kitchen, the air thick with heat, grease, and pressure. Line cooks moved fast, eyes down. No one wanted attention. Mark leaned closer to the grill station where a thick ribeye rested on a metal tray. "That steak," Mark said casually. "Use the one from earlier." The grill cook froze. "You mean the one that sat out?" Mark's smile didn't move. "The one that got sent back, room temperature for almost 2 hours." Evan's stomach tightened. "That meat's compromised," the cook said quietly. "If someone eats that, if he eats it, he learns not to walk into places he doesn't belong." The words landed heavy. Evan's chest burned. That could put him in the hospital. Mark finally turned, eyes sharp. And who's going to believe him? A homeless guy accusing a high-end restaurant?
He chuckled softly. "People like him get sick every day." Evan felt cold. This wasn't carelessness. This wasn't greed. This was punishment. Mark leaned closer to the cook. "Plate it, now." The cook hesitated. Mark's voice dropped. "Remember the knife set you lost last month? I told corporate it was a delivery error. I can just as easily tell you you stole it." Silence. The cook's shoulders slumped. He reached for the steak. Evan stepped back without thinking. And that's when Mark noticed him. "How long have you been standing there?" Mark asked calmly. "Just came in," Evan lied. Mark studied his face. "Good. Then you didn't hear anything." Evan nodded, heart pounding. "Take the plate when it's ready, and don't get creative." Evan walked out of the kitchen on legs that barely felt like their own. His hands shook as he stacked glasses. The words echoed in his head. "If he eats it, he learns." He glanced toward table 12. The homeless man sat calmly, hands folded, eyes scanning the room like he was counting breaths instead of minutes. He didn't look desperate. He looked patient. That somehow made it worse. Evan thought about his mother at home, her insulin cooling in the fridge, about his sister's tuition reminder blinking unread on his phone. If he caused trouble, he'd be fired. If he lost this job, everything collapsed. But if he stayed silent, someone could die. The cameras. Evan looked up. Black domes watched every angle of the dining room, every movement, every interaction. If he warned the man openly, Mark would see it before dessert. There was only one place without cameras, the staff restroom. Evan waited until the rush peaked, then slipped down the hallway and locked the door behind him. His reflection stared back, tired eyes, forced calm, a man surviving instead of living. His father's voice echoed in his memory, rough and tired from factory shifts. "Son, there will be a moment when doing the right thing costs you everything. That's the moment that defines you." Evan tore a corner from his order pad. His hands shook as he wrote, "Don't eat the steak. It's spoiled, on purpose. They want to hurt you." He folded it smaller, until it fit between his fingers like a secret that could ruin his life. The plate was ready. The ribeye looked perfect, seared, glistening, expensive, death dressed as luxury. He lifted it from the pass. Every step toward table 12 felt louder than the last. He placed the plate down carefully. "Ribeye," he said steadily, "medium." The man looked up. Their eyes met, and Evan knew this man already sensed something was wrong. As Evan set the cutlery down, his fingers brushed the man's hand. In that fraction of a second, Evan pressed the folded note into his palm. "Enjoy your meal," Evan said softly. Then he walked away, heart hammering, knowing one thing for certain. Nothing about this night would stay quiet.
The room went quiet. Not completely silent, but the low hum of conversations faltering like someone had pressed pause on life itself. Table 12. The man hadn't touched his meal. Not a bite, not a sip. Evan Brooks froze mid-step behind the service line. He could feel the weight of the eyes around him, the diners who thought themselves untouchable, the staff who feared speaking, the manager who thought he controlled everything. Mark Ellison's smile cracked. "What is he doing?" Mark whispered, his voice tight. He tried to mask it in calm professionalism, but his hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his tie. "He should be eating. He should be—" "He knows," Evan muttered under his breath, but Mark's attention snapped to him. "What was that?" Mark demanded. Evan stayed quiet. He didn't answer. He couldn't, not yet. The man at table 12 finally lifted his head, scanning the room. Not angrily, not aggressively. Calm, methodical. Each person in the dining room suddenly felt like they were under scrutiny. He wasn't hungry. He wasn't here to eat. He was here to expose something that the rich and entitled wanted hidden. Mark's panic rose. He realized the tables weren't just watching him, they were watching the man. And if the man revealed the truth, Mark's empire of intimidation would crumble. "Excuse me, sir," Mark said, approaching cautiously, trying to regain control. "Is there something wrong with your meal? Can I get you something else?" The man's eyes didn't blink. His voice was low, deliberate. "Everything here is exactly as it should be, except the part meant to hurt me." The words sent a ripple through the restaurant. Servers froze mid-step, guests whispered, and even Evan's hands trembled as he wiped down a table nearby. Mark's face drained of color. I don't understand," he stammered. "You do, and soon everyone else will too." Evan's heart pounded in his chest. He had just handed this man a note warning him, and the man had understood without a word being spoken. That understanding, the certainty in those dark, watchful eyes, was almost terrifying. Mark looked around desperately, noticing the diners subtly recording with phones. He realized the risk. Any slip, any accusation, any misstep could go viral in seconds. His power, his control, it was evaporating faster than he could act. "Everyone settle down," Mark barked, trying to regain authority, but the sound was hollow. Even his staff weren't following blindly. Evan watched silently as the man reached into his pocket and pressed a small, sleek device, barely visible under the table. Within moments, the front door swung open. 2 women in sharp suits stepped in first, followed by 4 men in dark blazers and a small team of security experts. The air in the room shifted. Calm authority replaced tension. The man at table 12 rose, revealing himself fully. Jonathan Miles, the billionaire, the owner, the man everyone thought was nothing more than a homeless stranger. Gasps filled the room. The wealthy guests paled. The couples who had whispered about him moments ago froze mid-chew. Mark's face turned an ashen shade of terror. "You've been recording everything," Jonathan said calmly, holding up the small phone he had carried in his shoe. "Every conversation, every instruction, every attempt to hurt someone in my restaurant. This isn't about wealth, this is about dignity, and you tried to steal that from him." Evan's chest tightened. He could hardly believe what was happening. The man he had feared for his job, Mark Ellison, was cornered in front of everyone, exposed. Jonathan's voice carried effortlessly across the room. "This establishment belongs to everyone who walks through that door. If you think you can intimidate, manipulate, or poison someone for your own amusement, you are about to learn just how wrong you are." Mark's hands shook. He opened his mouth to protest. No one listened. Evan's gaze fell on table 12. The steak, intended to kill, sat untouched. And in that moment, he realized something. Sometimes, the smallest act of courage can change everything.
Mark Ellison froze in the center of the dining room. For the first time in his life, he wasn't in control. His words, carefully crafted for intimidation, for hiding behind authority, fell flat. His staff avoided his gaze. The diners weren't looking at him. They were watching Jonathan Miles, the man who had walked in as a homeless stranger and now towered over the truth like a storm. Jonathan's phone played back every word, every instruction, every act of malice. The audio filled the room with crystal clarity. "Use the steak that was returned yesterday, room temperature for 2 hours. He probably eats from trash anyway. It'll teach him a lesson." Mark's smile cracked. He tried to stammer, tried to deflect, tried to say it was a misunderstanding, but every eye in the room, investors, politicians, wealthy patrons, and Evan saw through it. Evan's chest tightened as he realized the life he had feared losing could no longer matter. He had served the note, warned Jonathan, and now the man he had thought powerless was rewriting the rules. Jonathan turned to the diners. "You've been paying for exclusivity, for luxury, but some of you, perhaps many, have ignored the fact that dignity should never be optional. A person should never be punished for who they are or what they've lost." A hush fell. The servers, who had watched this man treat the wealthy and the poor with equal humanity, began to understand. Evan's gaze swept across them. Many had wanted to speak, many had wanted to do the right thing, but fear had held them back. "Now you see why fear is dangerous and why silence is deadly." He pointed directly at Mark. "You instructed my staff to serve spoiled food to a paying customer. You did it to humiliate, to scare, and to punish someone for your own satisfaction, and now you will answer for it." Mark's face went white. "No, this isn't. You can't." "Watch this," Jonathan said, gesturing to Evan. Evan stepped forward, his hands shaking, but his voice was steady. "I warned him. I gave him a note. I did what I could. I didn't know what else to do." A ripple ran through the room. The staff, seeing Evan speak with courage, began to stand taller, emboldened. A few whispered among themselves. Others fidgeted nervously, realizing they had been complicit in a corrupt system. Jonathan's eyes met Evan's. "You didn't just warn me," he said quietly, for Evan's ears only. "You saved a life tonight, and you proved something more important than loyalty to fear. You proved loyalty to what's right." Meanwhile, the diners began recording, posting, live streaming. The scene was spreading faster than Mark could contain. A few guests whispered about health violations. A few were already calling lawyers. And the wealthy woman from earlier, the one who had complained about sitting near the homeless man, turned pale, realizing the irony. She had been part of a spectacle she would regret. Jonathan pressed a button on his phone. Security quietly moved to restrain Mark, and 2 minutes later, the manager of Iron and Oak was escorted out, protesting loudly, humiliated in front of everyone. Cameras caught every moment, phones captured every word. Evan's hands unclenched. The tension left him, replaced by something new: purpose. Jonathan turned back to the restaurant. "We will rebuild this place from the top down. Training, standards, care. Every person who walks through that door will be treated with dignity. And the staff, they will be empowered to speak, to act, to save lives if they must." Evan felt a lump in his throat. For years he had survived, kept his head down, done what he had to for his family. Tonight he had done more. He had been brave, and the man he had helped protect, the one he had thought powerless, had just changed the rules of the game. Jonathan raised his eyes to the diners again. "Let this be a lesson. Power is nothing without responsibility, and courage is the only thing that can change the world." Evan stepped back to the sidelines, watching the chaos settle, the truth settle, and something inside him awaken. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning.
3 months had passed since that night. Iron and Oak was no longer the same restaurant. The marble counters gleamed, but now they reflected more than wealth. They reflected dignity. The chandeliers still sparkled, but the light was softer, warmer, like a welcome instead of a judgment. Evan Brooks walked through the dining room in his crisp, fitted black uniform. His shoulders were straight, his chin lifted. He had spent years surviving behind the pass, keeping his head down. Now he stood at the heart of the restaurant, empowered to make decisions, to protect the people who walked through the doors, to save lives if necessary. A new staff roster hung by the kitchen entrance. Each employee had been trained to speak up, to act with integrity, to prioritize safety and humanity over fear. Evan's name was at the top, not as a footnote, but as a leader. The doors opened, and in stepped a man. Worn coat, patched shoes, unshaven, but eyes alert. Evan smiled, recognizing the same fear and caution that had once been in his own gaze. "Welcome to Iron and Oak," Evan said warmly.
Would you like a table by the window? The man's eyes widened, suspicion giving way to relief. He had come expecting indifference, perhaps humiliation. Instead, he found respect. "Thank you," he said quietly, and for the first time in months, he felt safe. Evan returned to the center of the room. Behind him, a small plaque had been mounted on the wall near the entrance. The words read, "One small act of courage can change everything." Below, a short note was displayed. This note saved a life and reminded us all that dignity is not a privilege, it is a right. Evan ran a hand along the plaque, remembering the night he had risked everything to do the right thing. He had feared losing his job, his income, his stability, but he had chosen courage over fear, and it had changed not just one life, but an entire system. Jonathan Miles, now fully revealed as the owner, appeared beside him. The billionaire who had walked in as a stranger had stayed for the long game. He had rebuilt the restaurant from the ground up, turning a place of fear into a place of hope. "You did it," Jonathan said quietly, nodding at Evan. "You saved someone, you exposed the corruption, and you helped build something better. That's why you're here." Evan smiled, feeling the weight of the past lift. "We did it," he corrected. "All of us." A small bell rang from the entrance as more guests walked in. Families, professionals, tourists, all treated equally, all welcomed, all valued. The room buzzed with life, laughter, and conversation, but this time the hum of humanity carried more than noise. It carried pride. Evan glanced at the camera installed discreetly in the corner, part of the new transparency measures Jonathan had put in place. For the first time, it wasn't surveillance for control, it was accountability, safety, and trust. He turned toward the audience as if speaking directly to them and smiled. "If you ever think your actions don't matter, remember this: one small act of courage can change everything. You don't need money, power, or status to make a difference. You just need to do what's right. And sometimes the people who seem the least powerful are the ones who change the world." The camera zoomed out, showing Evan standing confidently in the center of Iron and Oak, the plaque shining behind him, the staff smiling as they worked, and the restaurant alive with energy. Jonathan stepped back into the shadows, watching the legacy he had built. But the true hero tonight wasn't him. It was Evan, the man who chose courage over fear, humanity over compliance. And in that moment, everyone watching knew this was more than a restaurant. This was proof that standing up for what's right, even in the face of danger, can save lives, inspire others, and change the world. The screen fades to black, and bold letters appear. "Courage is contagious. Will you be the next?" Hashtag courage changes everything. Hashtag hero story. Hashtag life-changing story. Hashtag waiter who saved a life. Hashtag dignity for all. Like this story? Hit like, subscribe, and comment below. Who's the one person in your life you would risk everything to protect? Share this story with someone who needs to hear it today. It might inspire them to stand brave too.